Thank you for accepting the invite on behalf of Agile Testing Alliance. It's a pleasure talking to you this morning.
Thank you, Brijesh. I'm glad to be here.
All right, John. To start up to start the interview up, could you please share your journey as a tester, how it began, and how you came into testing, and then what's kept you motivated?
Well, I started off as a developer.
Haha.
And I started off as a developer at a small independent industrial applications custom application place. And at that place, you had to run the tests as well as do the development work. So I was exposed to the testing, or started the testing then. You run your development test and then you hand it off to somebody who was more knowledgeable of the application, and they would abuse the product in the situations that it might be found in real life, but that were never expected to be, they're not articulated in a document someplace. In other words, a user actually uses the product in a different way than what is defined in a specification. And I learned a lot from that gentleman. And over the course of my career, I transitioned from the person who was designing the hardware and writing software to a person running tests, and to a person who managed a test department. So it was an evolutionary thing. Just kind of felt a natural extension of what I was already doing.
So what's been your inspiration to, sort of stick on to testing for all this time, if I may put it that way?
Yeah, it would probably be anybody that's a tester knows it can be a very uncomfortable spot to be. Time ticks away, deadlines inch ever closer, development is ever late. Maybe not ever, but occasionally late, and you're always in a position to try and figure out how to understand the product best you can in a short amount of time. And the challenge itself is kind of interesting, and the collaborations are nice too.
Right. It's very interesting that you spoke about transitioning from being a developer to a tester, and then to somebody who's been managing tests. So how have you seen testing evolve from the time you started actually testing as a developer to the current day? How have you seen testing evolve?
Well, almost 30 years ago, if you wanted to test something, you were probably doing it manually. In fact, my experience started off was manual. As a developer, you'd have an in-circuit emulator. In fact, even before the in-circuit emulators were all that popular, I was using simulators and then burning chunks of code and putting it in there, running some tests, and then eventually emulators come along, and those were very helpful. But even after emulators, the test cases were still manual, or largely manual, almost exclusively, I would say. What I see now is it's very easy and cheap to automate. If you automate anything that you can write a requirement for, if you can write a detailed enough requirement to answer a question yes or no, did it do it exactly or did it not do it exactly, then you should be able to test it automatically, which frees your testers up to explore the product in the ways that the guy that I worked at the start did. How will it be used in reality in the field instead of how we theoretically assume it will be used? The price of the hardware and the modeling software is pretty inexpensive these days.
Right. So you spoke about real world situations and people freeing up time to actually test it in the real world. So it's very much like buying a new TV. It comes with a user guide, but I'm sure that none of us have had the patience to go through the user guide. We just try and plug in the TV, somehow connect our dish or whatever we have, Comcast box or whatever box we have, and then latch onto the remote and start operating it. And if something's not working, then dial that 1-800 number.
Yeah, it
You
is like
know,
that. Well, there used to be a saying, all else fails, read the instructions.
yeah. So that is what testing the product makes uh, room for, because you've actually verified that, okay, if there's a user who would operate it not reading the instructions manual, then how would he go about it?
Yeah,
And what are the ways in which it can actually stop working and then eliminate those ways?
exactly. It's not everything. Everything that's in the spec is not everything that matters. You
Right.
can't document all of the I wish the product to do and all the I would like the product to not do events. So in my mind, the best use of your test talent is to allow that creativity and that exploration, the pushing the envelope of the product. And if it's written in a spec, then it ought to be a test case that's executed automatically
Yeah.
while your testers are sleeping and recuperating, for example.
Okay, so you mentioned that you probably began your career 30 years ago, and you've come a long way, and now we are seeing every day we hear about new terms, new buzzwords, if we may call it. We had agile a few years ago. Then now we are hearing about Internet of Things. We are hearing a lot about DevOps. So, with all this happening in the industry, how do you think testers need to prepare themselves or brace themselves to adapt to this kind of a situation?
Well, the fundamentals are still there. You're still trying to evoke the performance of the product in some way, to understand the boundaries, to understand the failures, especially the very unpleasant failures. A cosmetic blemish or your Netflix locking up is one thing, but your car brake stopping, that's a altogether different set of test cases and level of rigor. So those fundamentals of questioning are still in play no matter what the subject matter, I think. The only thing that might change is the speed or the pace at which they're expected to accomplish the characterization of the product. And then there's a little difficulty with there can be a little difficulty with the dispersed and development products, as in you write a chunk of code, I'll write a chunk of code, it'll go into a system that is in Canada and they're going to be running the tests. So gathering up those pieces of, of those design iterations to produce the end product or the end system, that's a bit of a challenge. That requires a good deal of communication and configuration management effort.
Right. Yeah. So again, I mean, with all this happening, do you really see, automated testing completely taking away manual testing, or you think that's still going to be there?
Yeah, there's no way automated testing can take away manual. What automated testing can do for you is take away the routine part of testing, the stuff that's scripted, and I mean scripted as in like a movie script, not the script that you would write to actually test. But that's part of the plan, right? You know how the thing is tested. If the product receives this stimuli and turns on a red LED, I don't need a test guy to send the data message and watch that red LED show up.
Right.
It's better to have that kind of uh, trivial thing handled by automation, and then no matter what, like we said before, the specs can't characterize all the boundaries of or articulate the all the boundaries of the product, and those require exploration from a talent and somebody who can creatively think. And presently, that's not automation. That's somebody thinking through what would I do as a user of this product. What could I do that might make something bad happen?
Right. So, understanding that testing has evolved, and the way testers have been thinking has changed over the years. uh, do you see the social media playing a role in how testers have changed their mindset or changed their approach towards doing things?
I've seen it with developers, so my guess is it happens with testers also. I've seen a developer write a snippet of code on a blog and post it on Twitter, or maybe it was LinkedIn, one of the two. And it was a pretty good looking piece of code, apparently. And then a number of other people came back and said, this could be optimized yet further. And they took his chunk of code, his routine, and made it a little better, or made it tighter or smaller or more compact, I think is what it was actually. So that I can imagine those same sorts of things happen in social media. What happens, testing gets better by human interaction, like the
Right.
spreading of ideas, the building of bigger ideas on smaller principles or smaller thoughts from other people. Like you'll have an idea, you'll say it or make it known to a few people around you. One or two people around you take your idea and have a discussion with you and say, let's what if we twisted it this way? What if we added this to it? And the next thing you know, you end up with something quite larger than what you would have done or what any of the other people that were involved would have done. And
Right.
you
So,
spread that out to the rest of the world.
yep, exactly. In my personal experience, I have seen testers take a lot of advantage. I mean, I personally have, I'm big on social media, LinkedIn and Twitter. So I get to see what other testers are doing because they put out their thoughts there, and a lot of times it has worked in my favor, because I've been in that situation, and I would be thinking, I'll be scratching my head saying, okay, what to do next? And I have the solution. I could just tweak it a little bit, and it's just plug and play for me. So
Yes.
it is really interesting the way it works. And so, quite obviously, you mentioned about about interaction. So from interaction point of view, do you think these meetups and conferences, they help?
I think they do. I think especially if you're hearing something that you've never heard or seen before, and if it's even if it's a little bit contentious, as in an idea that would make you really scratch your head and say, I'm not sure that's right, because it makes you stop and it makes you think. It should make you stop and it makes you think or consider, is that really true? So for me, I've had a lot of experience at conferences where I've been in the seat and I've taken notes and I thought, I'm learning quite a bit here. And some of it I disagree with, but I will ponder it or ruminate on it. And even as a presenter, you present, and sometimes there's people in the audience that will not see your do not see your point or will not see your point for whatever reason. And the fact that you're listening to that means you're open for perhaps you're wrong, right? Or how can I vet this person's concern and make it better
Exactly.
to make sure I understand it myself to the point where I can defend it better or adapt it better.
Right. Ultimately, it's about getting better, isn't it? Whether
Yes,
we.
that's right.
Right. So, what are your thoughts on the Global Testing Retreat 2016?
Well, I noticed the physical part. I'm thinking that's you see, this is white. It's not blonde. It's like gray. So the game part, I'm not so sure. We're not running marathons and things like that, I hope. But I like the comprehensive approach that you have there. It's it's the idea of let's sit down and learn some things together, and let's play a little bit together, and let's socialize together. And I think that's a good approach. It's a well-rounded approach. Sitting in a chair listening to somebody pontificate for an hour or two on end is not that's not all that. There's more to us than just a brain.
Absolutely. It's so the you know we are calling it an unconference where uh, we have the opportunity to unwind, come together as a testing community, learn from each other, and you know, learn through probably games, learn through interaction. It's about building that relationship. I mean, there are testers all over the world, and what better than a conference or a situation like that, which would bring us all together so that we can, share our thoughts and share our ideas. So that was the whole approach that went into uh, putting that unwind kind of a thing.
That's an interesting philosophy. I sort of share that myself. There are times when I've entertained having uh, a social / conference event where I would maybe even sponsor, or Value Transformation would sponsor, in a place called in the North Carolina mountains, because it give you a chance to learn, it give you a chance to get some fresh air and go out hiking in the woods and commune with nature a little bit, and it's a really nice place to go.
That's
Thought that
fantastic.
you're talking about here.
That's fantastic. So, could you tell us a little more about what you are going to be talking about a little bit about the proposal that you've made?
Okay, yeah, this was it was an automotive industry, and it was a project. It was a stage gate type of project. Some people would refer to that as waterfall, but it wasn't like you had all of the requirements done. It was not like the maximum incarnation of what waterfall was. But the testing we handled differently. We handled it actually as if it were an agile project. Instead of developers developing code, it was testers developing the test suite, the test cases, execution of the test cases. Instead of a boundary condition of 2 weeks or 4 weeks for a product iteration that's available, it was more like 6 weeks. So it was as much because the time pressures for the project. It was an emissions related project, which meant that the government said you have to have this product in place by January 1st.
Mhm.
And if you're not, you're going to be paying some fines, or you're going to be in an unpleasant place. So the time constraint meant that running the tests like we would normally run them or typically run them was probably not all that productive. Moreover, it was an entire system, which meant there were parts from this part of the world, parts from that part of the world. There were software components from Bangalore, even software components from Estonia, Mexico, and things like that. And they all had to come together at a certain point in time. So, and because it was up against a deadline like that, reporting back to the project and to the executives became very critical. So we developed some interesting metrics based on agile methodologies. Instead of a burn down chart, it was a burn up chart and things like that logged how the testing was going, including the defects arrival rate and things like that. So at any given time in the course of the run up to production, you would know the quality of the system, at least what your testers can tell you. And because this was radically different than what we had done, and I have not seen something exactly like this before, I think this is worthwhile presenting. Generally, it's either the project is handled agile all the way through, as in there's agile at the beginning with the product backlog and the sprint backlog, and the testing's incorporated that, and there's an iteration of the product, or it's stage gate. But this is some kind of mashup. It's conventional project management techniques, and the testing's handled very agile-esque.
Fabulous. I mean, that is something really cool. Would like to definitely, hear more about it. So, I have one question, because you have got so much experience to share, and so much that you've done in your 30 years of testing. What would be your tip, or what would be your advice to people who have started their testing career now, young budding testers, what would you tell them?
I think you have to question everything. Everything that you see in writing and everything that you are told about the product. Every time a developer tells you a customer will never do that, don't just listen to that and think, yeah, he's probably right. Really ponder that. Is that true? If they will never do that, if somebody did that, would they be hurt? Would they be harmed? Is society harmed? And take your cue from those kind of things, but question everything.
Right. So, next time they go to a supermarket and they see something which says, okay, this is say 1 pound of maybe onions or something like that, then they got to make sure that it's actually 1 pound and not less.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I might, if I was the guy purchasing that, I probably would let that one slide a little bit. Yeah. But if I'm the guy delivering that and saying it's 1 pound, then I'd want to find a way to make sure that that's pretty repeatable. There, no doubt. But you need, as a tester, you need to understand what that variation means on the performance and the customer's expectation. If you're okay with it a couple of ounces or off, then maybe it's okay.
Absolutely. Well, I think those were some very interesting thoughts from you, John. Uh, I would definitely be very much eager to listen to what you've got to say about the cool stuff that you've been doing. So, we will let the evaluation panel take a look at the paper and then take the next steps. It was once again a really wonderful way to sort of end my Tuesday, if I may call it that way. Great talking to you, and we will communicate further.
Thank you, Brijesh. This has been very fun. Thank you very much for this.
Yeah, you have a wonderful day ahead, and we'll keep in touch.
And you have a great evening.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.